Good morning, John Fogerty.
There he is. Yeah, you can close it, John. Yes.
Hi, John.
Hi.
Welcome.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Thank you.
We're thrilled to meet you, sir.
Not sure who I'm meeting here.
I'm Jim.
Hi, Jim. How
Nice
are you?
to meet you. This is Rich Voss.
How you doing?
Hi, Rich.
How's it going?
Good.
That's Opie across the
Hey, John.
Hi, Opie. How are
Huge
you?
fan. Oh, I'm great now. What's
Take
going
a
on?
seat.
Okay.
Welcome to the
My wife
area.
might be coming in here. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Didn't mean to leave her in a lurch. They
That's fine.
gathered in a crowd there.
Yes.
Are we on right now?
We are, yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
we're
hello, everybody.
we
Yeah.
were waiting for your arrival. We're very excited to talk to you about your book, The Fortunate Son: My Life and My Music. John Fogerty. You finally decided to write a book.
Why'd you wait until now? Is there something you wanted to do before, or you just
Well, really, let's see. There I am. It was my wife's idea. My wife, Julie, sorry.
are you fixing the headphones?
She kind of presented the idea to me, and this time, I think she's probably talked about it over the years. I've actually said it myself a couple of times. You know, when you do an interview in a newspaper or something, you're talking about, especially the legal things, and it's so convoluted that it never comes out right. Mm-hmm. And I'd say to myself, man, someday I'm going to write a book. And then after that, I just tell them, if they ask, read the book. It's in the book.
You could set the record straight, is what you're saying. Because when you do these interviews, they decide to edit it, and they have their own way of presenting the material. But when you write a book, look, this is me.
Yeah, and some things in life, little episodes are a little longer than a quick soundbite, and the only way to really give it the meaning and soul that it has is to have a few pages at least to talk about it.
Yes. I can't believe that the band CCR was only around for 4 years. It's
That's true.
amazing.
Yeah,
Considering
career
considering the material you guys put out there.
Well, I had been waiting my whole life. I love music, and
Yeah.
I've been preparing, and in the way that you do when you're absorbing and taking it all in. You watch, the people that you love, like Elvis or the Beatles or whatever, and you're kind of taking notes. Mm-hmm. Just watching how they act and what seemed to work. Of course, the Beatles were amazing. It's like everything worked.
Yeah.
But I think, anyway, they were really cool. Everything was classy up to a certain point, anyway. And so when the time came, we had that first hit, Susie Q. I really didn't want to end up as a one-hit wonder. I mean, that was, to me, I saw it that way. You're either gonna, flop and that's it, or you got to get real serious about everything you've been looking at and learning. You got to go now. Now's the time. Otherwise, it'll probably pass you by.
Well, the one-hit wonder thing is an amazing thing, because these bands come up with this song that is just played everywhere, and everyone loves it, and then they just can't follow it up. What do you think that's all about in the end? Because they had enough talent to really, put out a great song.
I read something about that one time. I think it was meant to be humorous, and it is, but
Yeah.
and the guy was talking about it. Said, well, they spend 15 years getting that one, arriving at that place where they have that one song. And so maybe it'll take them another 15 years to get the second song. I don't know. It's just you're right that the thing might be a novelty. It might be sort of something you can't repeat because it's so unique. For whatever reason, and you don't get much opportunity to mess up.
Right.
There's a real fragile time there where it seems to be in the back of everybody's mind, and they have that big hit, and then you get a few months, and if that next thing is sideways at all, you kind of go, oh, yeah, well.
And it's probably not even their favorite song that becomes the hit either. It's probably not the one that you like the most on the record
True.
that everybody grabs and becomes the number one song. So now you're kind of stuck with that as the big one you have to do.
Right, and you wish they would pay attention to maybe
To the rest of
something a
the
little
stuff.
deeper. You talk about, you just explained the sophomore slump, which happens to a lot of rock bands too, where the first album is so great because what you said, you had 10, 15 years preparing for that, so the first album's amazing, and a lot of guys fall off, or bands did over the years, because they call it the sophomore slump because they only have about a year to, get new material out there. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of cases, it didn't work out. Not in your case, obviously. You guys just killed it from the beginning.
You opened the book, too, talking about how you had something in common with one of the guys you idolized, which is one of the things you had in common with this guy was that you got tricked out of your royalties. How did you get tricked out of your royalties?
Well, basically, the owner of the record company gave us a contract that was very one-sided. I hate to say that. Anyway, the bass player, Stu's father, was a lawyer. And so when the owner of the record company gave us his contract, he gave it. I was having a meeting, I guess, with him down at his office, and he said, "I'm going to give you this contract. You guys look it over, and then we'll sign it." So I brought the contract back to my bandmates, and we just, we're, how can I say it? We're naive, we're young, but Stu, the bass player's dad, was a lawyer, a rather prominent attorney. Pretty big firm, and they represented a few entertainment people. The biggest thing was the Oakland Raiders, of course. Wow. So we said, we decided, well, Stu, you give it to your dad and have him look it over and then tell us what to do. And so, we thought we were being prudent and responsible.
Well represented. Yeah.
So a couple of weeks later, I know we were loading up our little Volkswagen van to go do a gig somewhere. It was like a late Friday afternoon, and we'd probably have to drive 3 hours or what. We're loading up, passing each other with drums and guitars and stuff. And, somebody says, "Well, hey, Stu." Yeah. "Well, what'd your dad say?" What did he say about what? "Well, what'd your dad say about that contract?" Because that's really what we were most, we're all kind of chiming in here. And there's kind of a pause, and then Stu says, "It's okay." And, "It's okay what?" "Well, he said it's okay to sign." And we go, yay, because, of course, we wanted to be able to sign. And that was it. That was all any of us ever really knew about that.
And how old were you guys?
At that point, I think I was 22.
Yeah, well, you're still very, that's a very young age to really understand the world, too.
And you don't know what to look for in a contract or what you should
you're just
watch out
assuming
for.
that you're being taken care of
Right,
at 22.
exactly. And, as I kind of point out in the book, we were all pretty naive. Now, Stu had gone to business college and graduated with a degree because his dad sort of forced him to, that's the way people do things. And so he finished, for his dad. But something I didn't know then, none of us did. But when you're older, you realize that you can negotiate. You don't just have to, here's a piece of paper, sign it. You can say, well, we'd like to, so you make a counteroffer. That's just kind of expected. We didn't do anything like that.
Had his father looked over it or no?
See, that's part of the mystery of the whole thing. The only person in the whole world that knows the answer to that is Stu, of course. I really don't know what happened. It sure looks very one-sided, and it's so ridiculously bad. I just wonder if a real lawyer actually did look at that thing.
You said too you felt betrayed by the by the band and of course the company. I understand, but why did you feel like the band betrayed you on this one? Did they get something that you didn't get?
Oh yeah, well. Like most, young rock and roll bands, you feel you're certainly anti-business, anti the establishment, and the idea of how can I say it, doing anything that looked like IBM, that would be so foreign to us. So what we did was we made an agreement among ourselves. It takes a unanimous decision of anything, for it to go forward, because we're blood brothers. We're a brotherhood here, right? And so the only way something could be decided was if we all agreed on it. At some point, way later, about 1980, it was 88, but I didn't find out until 89. I was having, it was much after all this stuff had happened, and I had convinced Bill Graham to help me try to work out all the issues with Saul Zaentz, the owner of Fantasy. I just thought, maybe Bill Graham can mediate this thing because we're not getting anywhere, and it's a really terrible situation.
Were you already in court by this time?
Oh, I'd gone to court several times.
Yeah, okay.
This is even after that. Anyway, I was on my way to one of those meetings with Bill Graham, and I hear on the radio this commercial for an oil company that's got this album that you can get if you buy 5 gallons of gas or whatever, and it's a compilation, a whole bunch of different artists, and Proud Mary's on there, right? Now, this is just a couple weeks after the Exxon Valdez thing, you know where I stand on all this kind of stuff automatically, and I'm really PO'd because, oh my God, it's an oil company. What is this? So he eventually, at first, everybody acts like they don't. Yeah, I'm not on speaking terms, really. It's not easy, but I have my brother Bob call up the other bandmates, and after they first pretend not to know anything about it, we finally learned that the other 3 guys have sold their voting right in Creedence to Saul Zaentz, my worst enemy, the guy at the record company. They sold their vote.
So he has a 3-1 vote over
He
you.
thinks he has even though we had agreed it takes unanimous vote, the business world, which is very foreign to us, will operate on a majority rule.
Yeah.
You assume, one would assume, and probably any judge that looks at it is going to go, oh, well, they have 3-1 votes, so go do it. But that really betrayed me when I learned that, and that was obviously why Saul felt he could now do anything he wanted with Creedence music. But the real capper in the betrayal for me was I got word that Stu wanted to see me. This is perhaps a year after this, somewhere in the following year. And he comes and, he basically he's saying he's sorry. He says to me, well, I've done a lot of things to hurt you. And so I want to apologize for that. And I look at him because after all the times I've been poked in the eye, usually after I had done a favor for them, and so I kind of wasn't in the mood at this late date to just, he's done another one that really hurt me, to just accept that. I looked at him and said, Stu, you go fix all those things that are still hurting me now that you set in motion, and then maybe I'll listen to your apology. But right now it's a pretty empty apology. Okay. I'm still being clobbered.
Yeah.
And then I said, by the way, how in the world could you guys sell your vote to Saul? I mean, what he's doing to me. He's my worst enemy. And Stu says, I just got tired of being asked, what movie should this song be in or what compilation album should it be on. He said, besides, I don't care. I don't care about the music. Just give me the money.
Oh, God.
And I look at him. There wasn't much more to say after that. But that was right there was the reason I didn't play at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with those guys.
When you got inducted. You guys started out very close, though, obviously.
Yes, in junior high school, yes.
And then in 1972, the band broke up, and you guys were huger than huge when you guys went away. And you guys couldn't figure out a way to make it work, even knowing the success you had up to that point, huh?
Well, how can I say it? After Susie Q, which was pretty much an arrangement that I had come up with, which is a cover song, of course, I began to write songs. I had been writing songs since I was 8 years old, but none of us could know that what happened would happen. Of course, you hope for that, but no one ever knows.
You never
Even
know.
athletes don't know.
Of course.
Well, maybe that guy's 10 seconds faster than me. Who knows?
Right.
And suddenly it all started to work, and I was writing songs and arranging them and singing them, and it was, going really good. And after 2 years of success that way, the guys decided they wanted to write songs and sing them. And, in other words, they were more jealous of what I was doing, the kind of, the attention I was getting, than being worried about what was the best music or the best record we could make.
And I want to add to that, they were very much influenced by the Beatles as well at that point. And you, but you had it. You didn't need their help. You were proving to the band and everyone else that you knew how to write a good song and
Yeah,
a good
and
arrangement too.
And it's kind of funny that because I knew my brother because we had written some songs together, and I just felt that his writing hadn't grown. His idea was, or his, what do you call it, the musical place he was coming from was kind of passé. You know, it was kind of old fashioned, and that's sort of to a kid that's a death knell. You know, to our audience, in other words. But the other two guys had never ever written a song, right? And it just looked at that situation, and that, in fact, I'd kind of been keeping it at bay, you know, keeping them away from doing that. Of course, they would get madder and madder about that. But I just figured it was career suicide. It would not be better for our band or our career. It'd be worse. But they were very, at the end of 1970, they were very insistent. And so this time I said, okay, if that's the only way we can stay together and keep going forward, okay, we'll do it that way. But I didn't have a lot of faith in what their efforts would be.
Yeah,
Did that kind of position you against the other three of them? Then it kind of sets up a weird dynamic, right?
It kind of ended up doing that. Yeah,
They really get back to the Beatles for a second. They thought you guys could be like the Beatles, where everyone is writing their songs and putting these albums together.
Yeah, the Beatles. There were times I said in years later that it's too bad the Beatles were there as an example, because everybody in my band thought they could be the Beatles.
Yeah.
Was your older? Oh, so your older brother was in the band with you, and like, did he start to get more? Because I know he left the band first. So was he like resentful because you're like the kid brother and you outshining him?
I read that later. I mean, much later. There was a few interviews he had done in the 70s, but I didn't read this until maybe this past year or so. And he said something like, well, imagine, here I'm the older brother. I should be leading, but yet my younger brother was leading. And he was bothered by it. I don't know if jealousy is the right word, but he was upset by that, and he wanted to be that person. And so you're right that Tom did leave the band, and amazingly, it was like 4 weeks after that meeting where I had said, okay, you guys can write and sing and all. Actually, it was more like perhaps 6 weeks, because in the meantime, we then went ahead and made it our last album together, which was Pendulum, the end of 1970. And then a couple weeks after that, Tom left.
That's amazing. And then you didn't play CCR songs for a long time after that, because you didn't want to pay Saul, right?
What really happened was the band broke up, and then I took a look at the contract, you might say. I wanted to know what my situation was. I was pretty naive. But I actually thought, well, now the band's broken up, so it's a new ball game. We're all free, and we can all do whatever we want. Well, what happened was the record company quickly let go of the other three guys, but they hung on to me, and I was stuck with the obligation that was in that contract. And that contract basically called for 180 recordings, meaning singles or tracks, and if they weren't done within a certain period of time, it was 7 years, but the obligation of each year would then just automatically slide over to the next year. In other words, it went on for eternity if I didn't turn in the 180 songs.
180 songs.
Right.
Wow. That's a lot of pressure.
Well, I kind of looked at that as a lifetime sentence. So
Yeah,
wow,
of course.
I can't do that. No one can do that. And as I tried to negotiate with them, I went in and actually had a meeting with Saul Zaentz, the owner, and the assembled cronies from Fantasy Records. I went there by myself. I didn't arrive with my posse or lawyers or just me, and I sat down. And after a couple of hello, how are you, that kind of thing, I said, well, I'm really having a lot of trouble writing any new songs or producing any new records here, because this contract is just so unfair. It's just weighing on my mind constantly. And immediately Saul says, that's not true. The whole history of art shows that the best art is created under situations of oppression and depression. Right, my mouth dropped open, of course. I mean, the first thing is I'm telling him how I feel, and his response is, that's not true. Meaning, what a thing to say. How do you know what's true?
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
But then to tell me that he's in fact helping me because I'm so oppressed and depressed, I should be making greater art. Anyway, after that statement, I realized I really couldn't say anything. So what I did say was, well, I'm going to get up and I'm going to walk to that door. If I go out the door, I'm never coming back here. I was kind of waiting for these other guys to kind of, well, no, John, let's talk this over
figure this
or
out,
something, you know. And I get up it's like a cartoon, and I sort of shuffle as slow as I can to the door, and I remember turning the knob real slow. I'm waiting for well, hey! But no, it's just dead silence, and I went out the door, and that was that.
Did you? And that's
unbelievable.
Yeah, and your brother kind of sided with them, which was an interesting thing, right?
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate.
Didn't he know what had happened, or was he just
Of
so
course he
pissed at
knew.
you?
Oh, sure. He knew. Even his kids knew. You know? And, you know, Tom went at the end of the 70s, I believe. He went over. He just kind of took a flight of fancy and away from reality, I guess, and moved to Hawaii. Then he came back after a year or so and kind of went around to all the record labels, came down to L.A. and all that, you know, shopped around, and no one would sign him. So he went back and signed with Fantasy, even though he was free and he could be anywhere. And this was at the time that the rest of us, certainly me, was suing Fantasy because of this financial plan they'd gotten the whole band in, and we had lost our life savings, and we were suing Fantasy and also this entity called Castle Bank, which was an offshore, you know, you've probably heard about these scams. But anyway, so Saul was able to get Tom to be his ally at the very same time the band is suing him. It weakened our position, obviously. It's Saul kind of being a Machiavellian kind of political finagler, you know.
How did you sleep at night? This is complete madness that was going on around you.
How did he sleep at night? Or me?
Just knowing what was right and what was going on, and no one there to really take care of the situation properly.
Yeah, well, and I'm really happy now. Things are fine, you know. So I hate to come off as a whiner or a complainer because I've done a bit of that in my past. But you kind of hit the nail on the head there. I was very angry and upset, and I felt completely trapped, like I couldn't move. And there was I couldn't get this stuff out of my head. It was just always like, "Argh." There was a point where I was actually awake for 3 days straight. After that, I started drinking, you know. And, I mean, you tell yourself all kinds of things when you're being a fool. And, yes, I would fall asleep, but I was certainly acting like an alcoholic. I was really depressed. Of course, alcohol only makes you more depressed. It's just the way it works. So that was sort of how can I say it? That was a result, not a good one. And so I kind of struggled through all of that for a long time. I call that my dark period.
Sure. Now, I was a huge CCR fan growing up, and a huge fan of your solo work as well. That should be noted.
Thank you.
Did the band go on without you? Because I certainly did not pay attention to that, the other version of CCR. Did they try to go out there without you?
Much later.
Much later, they tried to get it all together.
What they called the band was a different
they didn't
name.
get it all together. What happened, at least to my way of thinking, my brother Tom died. He passed away in 1990. So by the time we were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it was 93, and Tom had been gone for a while. And so Tom's son came to that ceremony. But Doug and Stu are very close, the bass player and the drummer. They've been, their birthday is one day apart from each other. And so I think, and Stu is kind of more the business guy and kind of the aggressive person. You've certainly heard about their reaction to me not playing with them at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, even though that day or perhaps the day before I had met them there at the place in the room where they were going to do it, and I wanted to make sure that they understood, I'm not playing with you. You guys know what you did, And Stu actually said, well, yeah, we did kind of leave you twisting in the wind. And I said, I just want you to know I'm not going to play with you. You understand that. Yeah, I'm probably never going to play with you again. So then, of course, the ceremony came, and then right after that, they made a big stink about, well, John shocked us. Here we were ready with our instruments, and we were going to play. Well, they knew the truth.
Right.
But they
pushed
made
that out
themselves look like the
good
victims
guys.
and got sympathy.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years later, they formed their little outfit called Creedence Clearwater Revisited.
Oh, that's right.
All right.
I remember that now.
And your brother died of a blood transfusion, right? He got
he had a bad back, I think. He had some back surgery, and apparently there was some AIDS-tainted blood. This is back in the days before anybody knew about it. And he contracted AIDS and eventually died.
And when he first got it, or when he announced it, did you guys immediately know it was a blood transfusion? Because back then it was thought like, oh my God, it's the gay disease, and that's who's getting it. Did you guys go like, what the hell's he been doing, or did you immediately know what it was?
Well, I'm not privy to any of that, of course. I only know what Tom said, and so that's the story, as far as I know. Sure.
Yeah. And the craziest story about
Tom was not gay.
No, I know, no, I know
not
he
that
wasn't.
that's either here nor there, but
No, I mean
he
when you heard it though, did you first think like, oh my God, what the hell's been going on? Because back then you didn't even know blood transfusions
it was
were causing
all
it.
no one knew anything.
Yeah, like Arthur Ashe got it, and people were like, what the hell's Arthur Ashe been doing? But it was just a blood transfusion.
Turns out to be a blood transfusion
Right.
in his case as well. The craziest rock and roll story is about you when they sued you. The run through the jungle and old man up the road, old man down the road. That story just blows my mind. I don't even know how you sat through that case. But basically, you move on. You got a solo career going. It's going well. You got this song, "Old Man Down the Road," and all of a sudden you're sued for, ripping off "Run Through the Jungle," which you obviously wrote and arranged.
Right.
How did you make it through that?
Well, right, just so that
Because
people
obviously
understand.
you didn't own the rights to Run Through the Jungle anymore, and that's why they felt
I
like
never
that.
owned them. That contract we signed was actually before I had written any of the songs. So they came into being not in my ownership ever. They belonged to the record company, to Saul. And so, and in fact, people will say, well, why didn't you just keep going? Even though that guy owns them, you still could have a career. Well, I kind of did that for 2 years until everything just kind of blew up. But yeah, Saul owned all the songs that I wrote during the Creedence era, except for the very last one, Sweet Hitchhiker, which was eventually I owned that one. But anyhow, so Saul was suing me owning the old song and wanted to own my new song, Old Man Down the Road. Trying to claim that it was the same song, right? But I said, it was all BS, of course. You can sue anyone for anything, right? It doesn't have to be a worthy cause. Right. You can, if you're going to spend the money and you hire enough lawyers, you can sue someone, and it may go into court, even if it's total crap. Doesn't mean they're going to win. It just means that they're willing to go through that
and they're going to
exercise.
They're going to put you through all that. In my humble opinion, that's a bad person right there, because he knows exactly what he did to you all those years, and he couldn't even let you have Old Man Down the Road and just let it just be. He had to sue you over that. That's
and
just
the worst
amazing.
part of that was sitting in the courtroom when Saul was on the stand.
Yeah.
Right. My lawyer asked him, isn't it true that this case is just a vendetta against John? And he doesn't even quite get the sentence finished, my attorney asking Saul, and Saul says, it's an answer to a vendetta. You could just see the steam coming out. His face turned red. That, as I've said later, that was almost worth the price of admission to see him that upset. But then Saul proceeds to tell a story I didn't know anything about. He says, that bass player in Creedence, Doug Clifford, right, that's wrong information, because you'd think he would know that Doug Clifford is the drummer and Stu Cook is the bass player. But he says, that bass player, Doug Clifford, came to my office with John's new album, Center Field, and he played a song on John's album and said, "John is ripping off Creedence. You should sue him." And so Saul says, and so I got together with my attorneys, and
That's
here we are.
ridiculous.
Meaning, just all that had to happen is some guy just tell him, "You should sue John," and right, so he'll go do it. But the part that was certainly a stab in the back was my ex-bandmate actually went to the trouble to take the record and try to convince the old record company that I was somehow ripping off Creedence. I certainly felt betrayed at that
What
point.
do those guys have against you that they were just trying to make it hurt so much? It's unbelievable.
I think, I really don't know. I'm not in another person's
Fair enough.
head. I just think
enough.
it's something to do with the fact that I've had some success, and they're envious of that, or they just don't like that, or whatever you want to say about it.
So on your album with Center Field, you have Vance Can't Dance.
Correct.
And the line, Vance can't dance, but he'll steal your money. Is that an overt dig at Saul?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's totally...
I was literally. It's funny. I was talking with the guy at Asylum Records. This is kind of in the late '70s, I think, and he told me I had made an album called Hoodoo, and they had decided to reject that album, telling me, "Well, John, we will put it out if you really tell us you insist, but we just don't think it's up to your standards," and it wasn't, of course. And then he says, "Why don't you go home and fix, the things that are bothering you?" That was without knowing very much about anything. He could sense that there was something bigger than this album that wasn't so good. So that's what I started to do. And then a few days later, the same guy, this was Joe Smith, who's a pretty well-known music business guy. He called me up. I was back home, of course. And I think he felt bad about rejecting the album. He kind of, it wasn't the best news. He was absolutely right. And it wasn't the greatest news you want to hear. And I think he just was a gentleman, and he was checking on me. And he says, "Well, I just want to make sure you're okay." He says, "The Kinks ended up they got really screwed by their guy in the record business. And they ended up writing a bunch of songs about that person. I think he told me who it was, but he says, so they got it out of their system that way." And we were about to say goodbye, and before I even got the phone down like that, I saw up, like in the radar we all look at, "Zaentz can't dance." I mean, I knew exactly what that meant. Wow, okay, and I didn't write the song right away, but it came pretty quickly after that.
Wow.
You had to change it to Vance, right? Was there some kind of litigation over that?
After the album came out, Saul, of course, he felt very personal that this must mean him, and he was going to actually perhaps be able to stop the record even being sold anymore. So Warner Brothers, which is where I was, decided I should change the title, change the song. So it went from Zaentz Can't Dance to Vance Can't Dance.
Wow.
And he knew.
Well, of course.
So at least he got the dig, of course.
There was another lawsuit that involved that with a great big, I think it was $140 million he was suing me for. It still sounded like a lot of money, but back then that sounded like $2 billion.
Of course.
Yeah.
And you didn't sing any CCR songs for about until 1987, I want to say.
That's true.
And
and then it was only
every once in a while.
it was that one time, and then I didn't again. Really didn't do them in public as a matter of course, you might say, until 1997.
Oh wow, I didn't know that
There
part of
was
the
a
story.
point of I did do them 3 different occasions during that 25-year period.
It was
And
always
that
for
all.
something very important.
Yes.
Yeah, it was for the Vietnam.
The Vietnam veterans in Washington, D.C.
DC,
on
that
the
was
4th
87.
of July. Yeah.
Yes.
That program was called Welcome Home, meaning all the vets from Vietnam. It was a terrible time in our history in America. We really hadn't thanked the veterans. Instead, we were kind of treating them like crap. And all these guys had gone over to Vietnam, and I don't think it was the kids, because I think kids knew because they were the same age. But the older people, and certainly the government, especially Nixon's government, how can I say it? people were mad about the war, and so the official people were able to shuffle that blame over onto the soldiers who fought the war, and that's way out of whack. That's just wrong. Those kids aren't making the policy; they're just going to do that horrible job that has been asked of them in pretty bad conditions. So this concert was an official way of saying, man, we understand what you guys did for us and we want to thank you. And I think it helped kind of mellow our cultural our thanks to those GIs, the men and women that were part of Vietnam. I mean, it certainly wasn't their call. The government, it was the foreign policy, you might say.
Sure. We still need to take care of the veterans better. All
Yeah,
these years
absolutely.
later, we're still not doing the right thing in a lot of cases.
It's exactly, yes. I mean, to me, the
It's gotten
tragedy
better,
is
though, but not.
when you hear about, people not being taken care of with hospital care and all that. It
Exactly.
just blows my mind.
Exactly. So 1997, you started playing CCR songs on a more regular basis.
Yeah, I
Well, did you work out a better deal for yourself?
no. I actually had an epiphany
Oh, okay.
whereby I just agreed, told myself it's time for you to start doing these songs. And in '97, I put out an album called Blue Moon Swamp, and through the good graces of my dear wife Julie, who is the one that's changed everything in my life, I felt good again. Felt good about myself and felt good about music. Was happy, and I am there now. And so this album came out, and I was gladly and happily embracing, all these songs I had written earlier.
Nice. That's fascinating.
Yeah, you must have missed singing them, right? It must have felt good to start singing that stuff again.
Absolutely, yeah, and so did the audience. Those first few shows around that time, there seemed to be a lot of guys in that audience. Men that were around my age, Vietnam veteran age, people that had grown up hearing those songs and hadn't seen me for a long time, and probably wondered if they'd ever see me. And so they'd be out there, and I'm singing. I didn't know what's going on, and all these grown men are crying, but it became normal, became something that happened at every show. And I finally figured out what was going on. People were happy. We were kind of enjoying this together.
We got to wrap up, but one last question. Where's Saul at these days?
About 6 feet under.
Okay.
He's in his 90s when he dropped dead, right?
I don't know. I had always told myself, well, someday I'm going to dance a jig on his grave, right? Because it was so important. I was obsessed with how much I disliked this guy. But when he passed away, it happened on a weekend a few years ago, and it kind of didn't mean anything to me. It really just kind of was a non-event.
Good for you.
Yeah.
With that, John Fogerty, we're just getting started. This book is an amazing read. I'm telling you
Fortunate
right
Son.
now, My Life, My Music. We barely touched the surface in this thing.
And do we have any? You're doing signings too, right? Are you doing one today? Do we have any list of signings or no?
I think I am, but I'm not the guy to ask because I don't know where they're taking
Yeah, we
me.
should have had it in front of us. I apologize.
That's all right. I'm in the middle of what we call a book tour. So-
Travis, hit that up.
Travis
got it. Really.
Tomorrow, 5th Avenue, Barnes & Noble, 1 o'clock.
Oh,
1
wow.
o'clock in the afternoon, you can go meet John, get your book signed. Barnes & Noble on 5th is awesome because it's a huge one, so there's plenty of room indoors. You're not going to be standing outside.
Exactly.
It's a great place for a signing, so you'll have a lot of people. And the book is great.
This was a pleasure, John Fogerty, for real.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for coming on in, and I want everyone to get the book, Fortunate Son, My Life, My Music. All right?
Yeah, thanks, fellas.
Come back
Appreciate
and
it.
see us.
You got it.
All right. Are we done? We're done.